The little girl sat alone in the corner of the bustling corporate party, her eyes downcast as executives in tailored suits walked past without a glance. No one noticed her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her dress, no one except Michael Jenkins, who recognized the isolation in her eyes because he'd seen it in his own daughter's face countless times before. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Your support helps us continue sharing these moments that might otherwise go untold. Michael hadn't wanted to attend the company gala. As a mid-level IT manager and single father, these corporate functions were exhausting obligations that took precious time away from his daughter Emma. But tonight was different. His babysitter had cancelled last minute, and he'd been forced to bring Emma along, despite knowing how uncomfortable these events made her. Emma had been deaf since birth, and at 12 years old, she'd already experienced more than her fair share of isolation in a hearing world. They'd arrived at the elegant hotel ballroom an hour ago, and Michael had been immediately pulled into conversation with colleagues eager to discuss the upcoming merger. Emma had found a quiet spot near the refreshment table, her book open on her lap, occasionally glancing up to watch the adults around her with curious eyes. "Jenkins, there you are." Michael's supervisor clapped him on the shoulder. "The CEO just arrived. This is your chance to make an impression." Michael nodded, his eyes scanning the room for Emma. She was still in her corner, but now she was watching a small figure who had just entered the room alongside a tall, imposing man in an expensive suit. The CEO, Richard Harrington, had arrived with his daughter. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, with dark curly hair and a blue dress that matched her father's tie. But what caught Michael's attention was the way she moved, slightly hesitant, her eyes constantly tracking the faces around her, watching lips and expressions with an intensity Michael recognized immediately. "Is that Harrington's daughter?" Michael asked his supervisor. "Yeah, that's Lily. Poor kid's deaf. Been that way since she was a toddler, I heard. Meningitis or something." His supervisor shrugged. "Harrington doesn't bring her to these things often. Probably hard for her to fit in." Michael watched as Richard Harrington was immediately surrounded by executives eager to speak with him. Lily stood at his side, her small hand clutching her father's sleeve. No one acknowledged her. They spoke over her head, occasionally giving her pitying glances before returning their attention to her father. The scene was painfully familiar. Michael had watched Emma endure the same treatment countless times, people who didn't know how to interact with her simply choosing not to try at all. "Excuse me," Michael said to his supervisor, already moving across the room. He approached Emma first, signing quickly. "See that girl with the CEO? I think she's deaf too. Want to come say hello?" Emma's eyes widened, and she nodded eagerly, closing her book and standing up. Together, they made their way through the crowd toward the CEO and his daughter. Michael could feel curious eyes on them, but he focused on Lily, who was now standing slightly apart from her father, watching the room with resigned loneliness. When they reached her, Michael knelt down to her eye level and signed, "Hello, my name is Michael. This is my daughter, Emma." For a moment, Lily just stared at him, her eyes wide with surprise. Then her face transformed, her eyes brightening, her mouth breaking into a wide smile that seemed to illuminate the entire room. Her hands moved quickly in response, signing, "Hi. I'm Lily. No one else here signs." The change in her demeanor was so dramatic that several nearby executives turned to look. Richard Harrington glanced over, his conversation momentarily forgotten as he watched his daughter's animated signing. Emma stepped forward, her own hands flying in conversation with Lily. Within moments, the two girls were deep in discussion, their faces animated with expressions that needed no translation. "You know sign language," Richard Harrington's voice came from behind Michael. Michael stood and turned to face the CEO. "Yes, sir. My daughter Emma was born deaf. I learned to sign before she could walk." Harrington's professional mask slipped, revealing a father's vulnerability. I've been trying to learn, but it's challenging. Between running the company and being a single parent, there never seems to be enough time. I understand completely, Michael said. I'm a single dad too. It's not easy, but it's worth every minute. Harrington looked at his daughter, now laughing silently at something Emma had signed. This is the happiest I've seen her at one of these events. Usually, she begs not to come, but her regular sitter is sick tonight. Same situation with Emma, Michael said with a smile. Babysitter cancelled. What department are you in, Mr. Jenkins? Michael Jenkins. I'm in IT, sir. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. IT. We're expanding that department with the merger. We're also looking at implementing more inclusive policies company-wide. He paused, watching the girls. Perhaps you'd be interested in heading up an initiative on accessibility? Someone with your personal experience would bring valuable perspective. Michael was stunned. I'd be honored, sir. Good. Have your supervisor set up a meeting next week. Harrington's eyes returned to his daughter. And perhaps, would your daughter be interested in spending time with Lily occasionally? It would mean a lot to her to have a friend who understands. I think Emma would love that, Michael said, watching as the two girls continued their animated conversation, oblivious to the important business discussions happening around them. As the evening progressed, something remarkable happened. The two girls became the center of attention, not because of their difference, but because of the joy they radiated. Executives who had initially ignored Lily now watched in fascination as Emma taught her a game involving elaborate hand movements. Some even approached Michael, asking him to teach them simple signs. By the end of the night, a small group had gathered around the girls, awkwardly attempting to sign hello and thank you, their corporate personas temporarily set aside as they laughed at their own mistakes. When it was time to leave, Lily hugged Emma tightly, then turned to Michael and signed, "Thank you for seeing me." Those 4 simple words carried the weight of countless lonely events where she had been present but invisible. On the drive home, Emma couldn't stop talking about her new friend. Her hands moved excitedly in the passenger seat as she described all the things they had in common. "Dad," she signed, "did you see how everyone wanted to learn to sign at the end? It was like they finally saw us." Michael nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Sometimes people just need someone to show them how to connect. The following Monday, Michael received an email from Richard Harrington's assistant, scheduling not only the meeting about the accessibility initiative but also a playdate for the girls that weekend. Over the following months, Michael's role at the company expanded. The accessibility initiative grew beyond his wildest expectations, with sign language classes offered to employees and inclusive policies implemented throughout the organization. Emma and Lily became inseparable friends, their bond strengthening both families. 6 months after that fateful gala, at the company's annual charity event, Richard Harrington took the stage. To everyone's surprise, he began his speech not with words, but with sign language. As he signed, Michael provided voice interpretation for the audience. "Tonight, I want to tell you about a moment that changed our company," Harrington signed. It wasn't a merger or a market breakthrough. It was when an IT manager named Michael Jenkins knelt down to say hello to my daughter in a language she could understand. The audience turned to look at Michael, who sat with Emma and Lily at a table near the front. "That simple act of kindness showed me what true leadership looks like," Harrington continued. "It's about seeing the people others overlook. It's about making connections that transcend barriers. And it's about creating a world where no one feels invisible." As Harrington announced the company's new foundation dedicated to supporting deaf education and accessibility initiatives, with Michael as its director, Emma reached over and squeezed her father's hand. "You changed everything, Dad," she signed. "Just by being you." Michael shook his head. "No, sweetheart. You changed everything by teaching me to see the world through your eyes." Later that evening, as the girls ran ahead of them in the hotel garden, Harrington turned to Michael. "You know, I've been CEO of this company for 15 years. I've closed billion-dollar deals and navigated economic crises. But nothing has taught me more about true leadership than watching you that night. I didn't do anything special, Michael said. I just said hello. Sometimes, Harrington replied, watching his daughter's joyful face as she played with her friend, hello is everything. And in that moment, under the soft garden lights, with the sound of their daughter's laughter, one voiced, one silent, both equally joyful, Michael understood that the smallest gestures of inclusion could indeed light up not just a room, but entire lives. The story of Michael Jenkins and Lily Harrington would go on to inspire a company-wide transformation, but more importantly, it would remind everyone who witnessed it that connection transcends words, that leadership begins with seeing the unseen, and that sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do for another human being is simply acknowledge their presence in a language they can understand. In a world that often moves too fast to notice those on the margins, Michael's simple act of kindness created ripples that would continue to spread, touching countless lives with the message that everyone deserves to be seen, to be included, and to have their unique voice, whether spoken or signed, heard and valued. And it all began with a single dad who knew what it meant to be overlooked, who recognized a lonely child across a crowded room, and who took the time to sign, hello, when everyone else had simply walked by.